Welcome back to Mom's Basement. Steve, take it away.
Mom's Basement is a podcast where we discuss video games, movies, and other nerd culture that shaped our lives. From inside of Mom's Basement, we dust off the old goodies that we feel deserve a spotlight in modern gaming and pop culture, all without wearing pants. So, what game are we talking about tonight, gentlemen?
That would be the one, the only, Monkey Island, The Secret of Monkey Island, the first installment. It's going to be a very good time. Yo ho, yo ho.
So good.
This game, it was 1990. It was released in 1990. A point-and-click adventure from Lucasfilm Games is the old brand it was. It takes place as basically you're a pirate in the Caribbean. You're trying to become a pirate in the Caribbean. And the remastered version, which I think is the one that we all played for this week, came out and was re-released in 2009. So that is the game that we're going to be discussing today. But now we have to move on to the second most important part of the stream, which is what is drinking today. So I'll start with you, Pete. What is the drink of choice today for the Monkey Island review?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. The first thing I just polished off was a banana smoothie.
A banana smoothie.
And water.
I like how you showed an empty glass. It's like, I had a banana smoothie. Anything could have been in that glass. Steve, what are you drinking today?
So, in honor of piracy in the high seas, I have a spiced rum and Coke.
Fantastic.
Because you can't talk about pirates without rum.
And I have a grog, if you will. It's a beer, but they call it grog in the game. That's what it is.
What are the ingredients?
Kerosene. I think it's isopropyl alcohol.
Turpentine.
Turpentine. It includes one or more of the following. So it said gasoline. It's amazing. But again, I hope you at home are enjoying a nice fancy drink as well, and sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of Mom's Basement for Secret of Monkey Island. So, let's get right into it. Pete, this week it was actually your choice to talk about Monkey Island. This is a game that you wanted to actually do as the first episode, but I rejected it because, one, no one listens to what Pete has to say in the first place. But then number two is I wanted to make sure that the pilot was... we got all the bugs out of the pilot. My voice was way too loud on the first episode, so hopefully it's all balanced this time, so it's a little bit easier to listen to. So, as this being the first real serious game that we wanted to talk about, why did we pick Monkey Island?
When it comes to games, being, all of us being born 80s and 90s, point-and-click adventure games were some of the easiest to afford without having to buy a system right away. And so I remember we would have like, hey, here's a Nintendo 64 with 3 games, and then here's 15 point-and-click adventure games. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it was one of the first things that we all really got into, but at the same time, this is one of the games that I think stuck with us the most as far as memories, some of the first things I remember doing while playing a video game system. But it's just damn hysterical as well.
So
really fun game.
So what are the kind of things that when you were playing it, for you specifically, Pete, you're the youngest of all of us. So when this came out in 1990, you were just
unborn.
you're basically like not born.
I was, yeah.
So it came out. You played it kind of growing up after the game had already been released. But what was kind of the stuff that you remember about Monkey Island? Your first time actually being exposed to it and really like playing this game for the first time.
So funny enough, it actually didn't start with Monkey Island. I remember when we used to go to the library when we were kids, there was a free-to-play point-and-click adventure game called Freddy Fish. I remember saying as a kid, like, man,
I don't remember Freddy Fish.
You don't remember Freddy Fish?
I don't remember Freddy Fish.
Yes. Oh man.
And so I remember playing that, and I was like, I wish they had another game like this that I could play at home. And then one day I was sitting watching either you or Steve, and I was like, what's this? And you're like, this is Monkey Island. And I was like, I love this game immediately. It's fantastic.
Freddy Fish. I'll have to find this later. I don't remember this at all. At all, I don't remember this. But Steve, what about you? For you were actually in 1990. You were just about into your
8.
Yeah, you're almost 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I probably didn't get into point and click adventures till about 95. And for me, it started with, I'm sure, and I'm sure at some point we'll do this, but it was Full Throttle. You know, huge Star Wars fan, huge LucasArts fan. So growing up, I remember sitting with a buddy of mine in his room playing Full Throttle, like, and just fell in love with the idea of point and click adventure games. Um, Sorry about the screaming.
It's fine. We've got kids.
I do, but then after I'd played through Full Throttle like 600 times, I remember I went to Media Play,
Mm.
and they had a set that had Secret and LeChuck's Revenge on one disc and Curse. So
Ooh.
I remember buying that. I remember installing every single one and then just immersed myself in all that was Monkey Island. And it was the sort of like, how could I have missed this game? This is everything that I wanted. It's comedy, it's pirates, it's point and click adventure, in its gloriousness.
It's very much so. Me too. I remember playing Curse first. I think I played Curse of Monkey Island before I actually played Secret of Monkey Island. Just kind of clicking around in it. I was very young at the time. I probably played it close, similar to 95, 96 when you actually brought it in. So that was the point in my life where I was just playing games. I didn't really understand what the game was. Just kind of, spending time on it. But I remember I opened up Secret of Monkey Island, and when I was playing through it the first time, the music, when I reopened it this time, that was what I really remembered when I was playing this game. Less so much about the story and what was going on. I remembered some of the gags. I remembered some of the major, what do you call it? I remember some of the major, like, big events in the game and some of the cool, like, mechanics. I want to talk a little bit today about the insult sword fighting, which is also something that kind of shaped a lot of even, like, Dungeons and Dragons experiences that I've had. It really kind of spread out to everything. But the music of Monkey Island is what really was stuck with me. I've always been kind of a music person. Music has been the thing that I get most nostalgic about when I'm playing games for the first time after a while. And when I opened up this game to play this week, it was very much like, oh wow, I that was the big thing that hit me. And I kept, in the remastered version, you can switch between the remastered and the original if you hit, like, I think it's F10 on the keyboard. And I played I actually am doing a Let's Play right now. I'm going to upload that after this, so everyone can kind of understand the game and watch it and maybe rewatch this afterwards. But sometimes I would just turn it to the old version and listen to the old, like, 16-bit music, and I was like, oh, this is what brings it all back to me. So music for me
That's
was
how I played it this time.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
really?
that's like oh yeah, because I've beaten that game on the remastered version numerous times, but this time, to prepare for this week, I did the whole experience in classic 1990 point and click adventure mode.
That sounds I should have done that. I'm doing the remastered version right now because it's a little bit more friendly towards like casual watching. If you're playing, if you're like watching on your phone or something like that in my Let's Play, then the writing can be kind of small sometimes. So I was like, let's do the remastered version because it's full voice, which is amazing, fully voiced. It's just really cool. I really liked it. But where does this game, Pete? You talked about, what is it, Freddy the Fish? That game. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of point and click that exist in even today. There are still some big point and click games coming out today, and I want to talk a little bit about where this game sits on that hierarchy of point and click adventures. Do you think that this is more towards, like, this is the pinnacle of where it's the pinnacle of gaming as point and click right now? Maybe no, but is this, how much of a trendsetter was Monkey Island in comparison to all of the other point and clicks that there were? Indiana Jones, Dig, they've got Loom, we've got Full Throttle, as you said.
Pete, you want to take that?
Yeah, so honestly, if I had to give it a word, I would honestly call it the tutorial of point and click adventure games. What I liked about it is, if you remember the old games where it's like you would sit and type things, where it's like you see a door, open door, it's locked, look for key,
open,
and then
try again.
Yeah, exactly. And what I loved about that game was it was kind of like they made a joke out of those elements of it.
Mm.
So then when you go to the other games that came later on, you're kind of like, oh, well, if I'm thinking in this Monkey Island terms, I should probably pick that up and use it with that, and then use that combined item on that. So when I say tutorial, I mean it's like they have every command listed out in the bottom. You've got your inventory you can scroll through. Everything is right there. And later on, you see some of the games where you just get like the 3 icons. It's like talk, touch, or look.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of think in terms of Monkey Island, as I like to say.
No, that's a good point.
So-
I remember in Broken Age, one of the new games that we're playing recently, there was a thing I was like, oh, from Monkey Island, I know that this is how you solve it. So I agree with that. It could be a little bit tutorial, but maybe it's a little bit too towards the center to be considered the tutorial. Steve, what do you think?
Sure.
Well, so one of the things that LucasArts really figured out back in the late 80s and early 90s was how to craft the adventure experience. And Monkey Island was probably at least in my opinion, like the most polished experience that came out. Because, Pete, you talked a little bit about like Indiana Jones, or maybe that was you, Dan.
Yeah.
But like you had Indiana Jones Last Crusade, Indiana Jones, and the not Infernal Machine, Curse of Atlantis, maybe is what it was called.
Atlantis. Yes, that's the one I beat. That's the one I played.
Yeah, but like those classic traditional, like for example, Last Crusade or the Labyrinth or Zork, or even like Maniac Mansion, there were points in the game where if you didn't amass the right stuff, you lose.
That's correct.
Like if you don't get all the stuff you need when you needed it, you can't progress past it.
Yep.
Which creates a barrier, because you're talking about then either going back saves, or you're talking about having to start completely over and hoping that you can find this one item. Monkey Island was one of the first experiences that you could, like, it would not let you physically progress until you had solved all the puzzles and acquired everything that you needed.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. There were these old like locks on that game.
Well, like King's Quest too. Like King's Quest was a notoriously like unforgiving game. If you didn't have something, if you didn't forgot something, you're SOL. Like you're done. It's like start over. So I think that's something that's worth talking about too. It's like LucasArts was really looking at it and created an experience, right? Because Monkey Island is hilarious. The puzzles are funny. There's a ton of different references like interweaved in the game. There's a ton of humor. There's lovable characters that you can relate to. I like, who doesn't love Stan, the used boat salesman?
That's I was recently doing my Let's Play, and that was the part that I just went past, and I love Stan. I also liked the Fettuccine Brothers. That was another Alfredo and Bill. It's like, Bill, why? Yeah, but I agree with that. Like, I never played the older games where there were, I guess, as you said, like fail conditions, where if you don't do XYZ, you can't progress in the game and you lose. I never really played those games at all. I was introduced first on Monkey Island, and I had a really good time. Monkey Island was like the second game I've ever fully beaten. Like the first game I ever beat was Ocarina of Time. That was the first game I made it to the final boss, beat the final boss, saw the credits. After that, it was Monkey Island, Secret of Monkey Island. That was the second game I ever fully finished. So for me, Monkey Island rests as my starting point for point and click, because I didn't play Full Throttle or anything until after I had already played Monkey Island, and then I remember playing Full Throttle and thinking, wow, this game is like way more high graphics and like better of everything, but still like super pixelated.
It had dialogue.
Yes, it had voice to dialogue. There were some interesting mechanics that other games like what was it? The Indiana Jones game, there was a thing where you like fought a guy outside of a bar at one point. Some little things, but overall, one of the mechanics. So I want to talk a little bit about going back and replaying it. So actually, this week, Pete finally played one of the games that we asked him to play, and he went back and I think you beat it, right?
No,
it took me 3.5 hours. That's the fastest I've ever beaten it.
I'm taking my time with my Let's Play, but I want to hear about your kind of re-experience of the game. When was the last time you played it before this point, and what was your experience kind of going back through it this time? What are things that caught your eye?
So the last time I played it before now was back in college when they re-released it on iOS. So it had to have been like 2010 or 11.
Released in 09,
so it did. Yeah, and so I picked it up maybe a year or two after they remade it. But since then, I mean, it's been 8 years or 9 years, whatever it's been. And when I picked it back up, I remembered so much of the classic version. That's why I switched it back over into its old 90s look. And it was like you said, you hear the music, you see the story, you see Guybrush turn and walk down the stairs to the overlook. And I was like, it's all back. Here it is.
Yep. Yep. I had a great time with it. What was one of the points of the game that you really enjoyed playing through? For me, when I was gathering the crew for your ship before you leave from Monkey Island, the whole meat hook, like his tattoo and his talking and that, like I liked that. I was like, this game is so amazing. Like that was the point that really stuck with me. I haven't played all the way through it yet. I'm still just on Monkey Island right now, but that point until now has been, aside from the insult sword fighting and all of that, I love that point. But meat hook was my big. I remember this. What was yours?
Honestly, for me, it was when you get to the troll on the bridge and you have to give him that stupid fish that you get from the back of the scumbar.
Literally the red herring.
And the reason is, so literally the red herring. The reason is because as a kid, I wasn't like fully aware of all the conversation and like the jokes, and so literally I went there with my full inventory and I was like, give him the flower petals, give him the meat, give him this, give him the shovel, combine, like use the shovel with the mints and give it to him. It's like, no, like I remember spending hours until I think it was Steve, you were like, give him the red herring. I'm like, where in the hell is the red herring? It's like, go to the scum bar.
Yeah.
And so being able to walk up to that now and just be like, here's your fish, and then like, yeah.
That's the George Lucas cameo.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I laughed about that when I was like, "Oh my god, he put himself as the troll, literally a troll in the game." But Steve, when you played a little bit, did you end up beating the game, or did you just play through a little bit of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've played through that game numerous times.
Fair enough. When was the last time you played it before you did this one?
Honestly, Secret of Monkey Island is one of those games that I revisit about once a year.
Sure.
I think between Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, and Secret of Monkey Island, those three games I probably play once a year. So I think the last time I played it was on a flight to a conference like in Africa. Yeah,
Nice.
I had it on my phone and just sat and played Monkey Island.
So how was it coming back? And what, I mean, because you have, I think, a very similar experience to me. I own Monkey Island on every device I have. It's on my iPad, it's on my phone, it's on my computer, it's on my laptop. It's literally everywhere. So anytime I'm like on the train here, or just like I'm on a lunch break or something, I'll open up either Secret or the second one. What was the second one? Return to LeChuck's Revenge. Yeah, LeChuck's Revenge. I'll open up one of those two and just play a little bit of it. So I've beaten this game dozens of times, recently even. So I don't think it was as nostalgic as Pete was, but every time I open it up, the music hits me. What was the big, like, either point in the game, or what was the big event or point of the story that you always is like, oh yeah, this is Monkey Island for you?
Well, I mean, so aside from, to me, Monkey Island is insult sword fighting, and I know we're gonna get to that in a little bit. So, aside from insult sword fighting, I think some of the most memorable experiences are the cannibal interaction.
Oh yes.
How when you keep trying to take the banana picker out of the hut,
gets progressively more. The door, it's like a hydraulic lock on the door. Yeah, I love it.
Ears, and then they're like, should hold him.
Yeah, every time. Oh, it's so
I think that, and then I think also again, like on Monkey Island, when you're on it and you're adjusting the angle of the catapult, and you sink your ship.
Yeah, sink your own ship. Whoops. Yeah. It also has the death gag where you like walk and fall off the little cliff there, and it's like you died, and then you just jump back up. Yeah, that scared me when I was playing it the first time.
What about when you actually hold your breath longer than 10 minutes?
Yeah. That's another one.
What other choices? Float and like
float, decay.
Yeah.
Drift. Or something like
those. Amazing game. So let's.
I mean, and it's those subtle things, right? Like Guybrush mentioning, like, I can hold my breath for 10 minutes, and then if you go beyond 10 minutes, it's like
you die. Yeah, that was it.
You just died.
That was the limit. the jokes of the game, the dry
One
comedy.
death.
The dry comedy in the game is amazing to me.
Yes.
Like in the very first, when I was playing my Let's Play, I went into the Scum Bar the very first time, and I told someone, my name's Guybrush Threepwood, and he's like, what a ridiculous name. I was like, what's your name? He's like, my god is Mancomb Seepwood. It was like, dude, it's this it. Like I just laughed so hard. I was like, oh, I love this game. Like this, the jokes.
And what about the advertisement for Loom?
Oh
You know, like-
yeah, the guy, he's just like totally stone faced, says nothing.
Hi.
You ask about Loom, and it's a little like 3-minute advertisement for the game. Love it. It's so good. But let's get into it. So let's talk about the kind of elephant in the room here. This insult sword fighting thing. This the author of the book Ender's Game, what was his name?
Orson Scott Card.
Orson Scott Card. Thank you. Wrote all of the jokes for insult sword fighting.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
He did. If you look in the
Really?
game credits, he is credited as the author for all of the jokes. So he did the punchlines, and then he wrote 2 top jokes to hit those punchlines. So he did all of like the learning insult sword
Wow.
fighting, and then he did the sword master. So you have to like fit that. If you look through the credits, he is the author of all of those, and that has been such an influential thing for me. No other game ever has had a fighting mechanic that was so simple yet so engaging, so fun, and like grinding those insults is one of the most fun parts of the game in my opinion.
I agree.
In my opinion,
Absolutely.
it's great. I love everything about it. I don't know, like Steve. I know that even for you, when we played D&D, well, we still kind of play D&D.
I built a whole D&D character.
Exactly,
around the
exactly.
Insult Sword Fighter.
Yeah, I mean it's
You know what's one of my and you mentioned this. My favorite part of that is when you're learning the insult and you respond incorrectly.
Yeah.
Like when you intentionally respond incorrectly, and he's like, no. That's
you
what
don't
I
say
said.
a cow again. Yeah. And you learn it. It's like, damn it. He's like frustrated
The part
with you.
about that, the part I love about that is as soon as Guybrush walks out the door, like he says, "Can't help feeling that I got ripped off," and I'm sure you're feeling the same.
Yeah.
In a pirate game,
That fourth
we
wall.
pick this game up. We're gonna have pirates, we're gonna have combat, we're gonna have ships, and then you're like, wait, insult sword fighting? Like this is the combat in the game, and it's like, okay,
But
I guess this is fine.
That's the perfect culmination of the essence of Monkey Island, I think, is that insult surfing. It's the dry humor, the adventure, and like just the whole again, the whole essence, the whole package. Thank you. The whole package of Monkey Island, I think, is encapsulated in that insult sword fighting.
Yeah.
And I don't think it ever made a resurgence in any of the other games that came out for Monkey Island. I might be mistaken.
It did
I
in
think
Cursed,
in Escape
but
there was. In
Cursed it had to
Escape there was like
rhyme.
Cursed had no rhyme. In Escape there was like a paper rock scissors, like Monkey Combat or something like that. But it was not insult sword fighting.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. That whole mechanic is the best. Honestly, I don't think there's anything else in that game that is really even close. Like that, it's right up in the front of the game itself too. Like you get the sword, you steal the sword, you like go get trained, and then it's like insult sword fighting. So I love the game. I don't think there's any game like it, and insult sword fighting is the best part of this game, I think, in my opinion. But the last kind of thing I want to talk about today is kind of how this game impacted other games that came out after. So Steve, you and I have been playing a lot of the newer games, the point and clicks that have been coming out. What is it, Broken Age, and there was one more. Thimbleweed Park. Yeah, Thimbleweed Park.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
how do you think because you've played way more point and click adventures than I have. I've played a couple, but this is kind of like something that you have always been like, hey Dan, check out this point and click, and I always have a great time with your recommendations on these. They're always very fun games, multiple playthroughs of them. But how do you feel Monkey Island has impacted these new point and clicks, and do you think that the genre is improving, or do you think it peaked during the Lucasfilms era? Like, what do you think about kind of point and click as a whole?
So, I think that's a really good question. So first of all, I mean, if you look at it, like Michael Land is such, or excuse me, Ron Gilbert is such an iconic point and click adventure master. And I mean,
Mhm.
and he really was. He had his hands in every single one of those early LucasArts point and click games, and just got the formula right. But if you look, Monkey Island was co-written with by Tim Schafer,
Mm.
and Tim Schafer is the one who I think took point and clicks to the next level, because we're talking about Full Throttle, we're talking about Grim Fandango, we're talking about Broken Age. You know, his entire production studio happened because of his work in adventure games. And I mean, and that's even like the adventure mechanics to what's the one with with Jack Black.
Point and click adventure with Jack Black.
No. It's like a rock game.
Of Destiny.
Oh, it's got to be Pick a Destiny. I think Pete's right. It's like an
Maybe.
Xbox game, an Xbox release or something like that, right?
Yeah. Or the other one, Psychonauts. I mean, that's like a huge um a hugely wildly popular game that happened
Mhm.
because of
Brutal
Monkey Island.
Legend.
Brutal Legend. That's the one I was talking about.
It
Brutal
is.
Legend.
Sorry.
Thank you. But those games happened because of Monkey Island.
Mm.
Right? I mean, and you look at Broken Age, and that homage to the genre, and then like we had talked about Thimbleweed Park. I mean, Thimbleweed Park was Ron Gilbert reproducing a Monkey Island-esque game in that exact style, with the dialogue boxes, with the adjectives. I mean, these things wouldn't happen, wouldn't have happened without Monkey Island. I think Monkey Island is the pinnacle of where these games come from.
Yep, I agree. As you said, it was the start of adventure games that weren't so brutally Monkey Island's a very difficult game. If you don't know the puzzles, if you're trying to figure out the puzzles, it's still very hard. But it's not impossible as some of the other games were when you're trying to like not get locked out of things. It's not as intimidating.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that opened up the doors, I think, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, and you also look at it too, right? Like, previously, it's like King's Quest was really geared towards that kind of like fantasy. It's high fantasy. It's like maneuvering through dungeons. It's dragons. It's all that kind of stuff. Indiana Jones, great games, but those are very niche market.
Yeah.
Like Zach McCracken, Alien Mindbenders, Maniac Mansion. Like Monkey Island, I think was one of the first games that really like appealed to the mass.
It's pirates.
To the
Like everyone knows
masses.
pirates,
It's
right?
pirates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great. So last kind of question then, where do you see point and click going in the future from now? Is it done? Do you think that we're getting a resurge right now, or do you think it's kind of very select games sporadically coming out?
There's actually a really big there's a big group of indie developers that are continuously producing point and click style games. And I think point and click as it was in the 90s, like the LucasArts era, it's like I think we're not going to see as many of those like Thimbleweed Parks, because that's just pure nostalgia binge.
Yeah.
But I think the genre in itself has evolved. Like you look at the entire Telltale suite, and I think that those games before Telltale shut down were a product of the Monkey Island
Correct.
franchise. The one I've been playing recently is Disco Elysium.
I haven't played this.
Have you?
No,
Oh
I don't
man,
know.
this is like a psychotropic like adventure into like the mind. So like you wake up, and literally the opening premise of the game is you're having a conversation with like your inner psyche, like the most primal
The ego.
instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're talking to the ego and the id, and it's like you kind of come in, and then as you finally like regain consciousness, you're lying on the floor in your underwear, and it's just like, what the hell is this?
I'll have to check it out. Send me the name of it later. I'll download it. I'll check it out.
Disco Elysium.
Disco Elysium. There it is. You heard it. Go check it out.
But I mean, but I think that type of humor is reflected by what Monkey Island set as kind of the precedent.
No, I
think
agree.
they're a little bit gritty. I think they're darker. I don't think we're going to get this golden age of resurgence of point and click adventure games as they were, but I think certainly they've adapted.
Awesome.
And embedded themselves into modern games.
I 100% agree. So we're getting towards the end of the episode now. So I want to start a new a new section. So I want to talk about Pete. I want to hear your final thoughts about Monkey Island. I want you to give it a score of 1 out of 10 rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle. How many rubber chickens with a pulley in the middle would you rate Monkey Island? And give me your final thoughts about Monkey Island, Secret of Monkey Island.
Man, all right. If I had to rate Monkey Island on a scale of 1 to 10 rubber chickens with a pulley in the middle, I would probably give it 11. Reason is, again, for me, of course. Reason is because for me it was the first. I have a little more favoritism towards it because it's the one that I use as my kind of litmus test for all other point and click adventure games. I've played the other ones, but for me, because that was the first experience, I was kind of privileged to say like, oh yeah, that was the first one. I didn't have to deal with the other ones where it's like, you don't get it, you die, or it's further along. I would give it 11 because it hit all those points. Like, I love pirates, I love the comedy, the music, just the story, and the fourth wall jokes. Like, it's one of those things, like Steve said, I have to play it every year because it's just so much fun. Even though I've heard the jokes 15 times, I laugh every single time.
I love it. Steve, what do you think? Final thoughts of Monkey Island, and how many rubber chickens with a pulley in the middle do you rate out of 10?
So I think final thoughts is, if you haven't played it and you're looking for a game that has pirates and comedy and head scratching puzzles that when you realize how to solve them will make you feel dumb, but just laugh and smile the whole time you're doing it, I think Monkey Island is the game for you. I think that everyone should experience insult sword fighting. I think everyone should experience grinding for all like 20 of the responses to the different insults. And in terms of like rating the game on a modern scale, like comparing it, I think it still really holds up and is very strong. So I would say probably 9 out of 10 chickens with rubber chickens with a pulley in the middle.
I respect that. I'm not going to copy another 9 over. I'm just going to delete off of here. But yeah, I think that's a very fair. It wasn't the perfect game, but it was definitely the catalyst
it stands
started.
up.
Yeah, exactly.
It stands the test of time.
Yep. I mean, I wouldn't be playing it literally as you do, almost once a year or once every couple weeks, if it didn't. So yeah, for me, again, Monkey Island is when I think of point and click, I agree with Pete, as it's kind of the litmus test, as he said, of, is this better or is this worse than Monkey Island? And there are better games than Monkey Island out. I really had a good time with Thimbleweed Park. I think that might be an overall better game than Monkey Island in terms of humor and things like that. But without Monkey Island, as you said, it wouldn't be there. So I respect this game. I think this game is absolutely necessary for the point and click genre. You can't talk about point and click without talking about Monkey Island. And I will give it a solid 10 out of 10 rubber chickens with a pulley in the middle of it. That doesn't give me much room to go above that for other better games, but for lack of a better term, it's 10 out of 10.
We'll change the rating context, so it will be meaningless.
Yeah, but right now, if we were rating on a system of rubber chickens with a pulley in the middle of it, it would be 10 out of 10. If we were rating this on stars, it would be different. So based on the rating system, yes,
right.
we're locked into this right now. But yeah, I think that's about it for today. For the episode, I appreciate you guys being here, and I think we are going to close it up for next week. Hold on a second. Oh my gosh, everything is going so crazy. 1 second. I want to make sure.
It's going to be a good one. Good one next week.
Next week on Mom's Basement, we are going to be discussing Duke Nukem 3D. So please join us next time.
Hail to the king.
Hail to the king, baby. We will see you guys in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. And this is Danberg and the boys signing out on Mom's Basement.